I assume that the host can both hear me and see me.
Yes, they can, Brother Welch. I'm on. I'm just finishing up something. Glad that you're here. You are correct. If I can see you, they can see you. I think they're just fixing up. See, good. I'm on. I'm just finishing up something. Prince. Prince.
Hi, James.
Hey. Brother Welch is with us.
Yes, welcome, Brother Welch. Good night to you, sir.
Good night to you as well.
Okay, all
Good to
right.
see you. All right.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Brother Welch, and welcome. I mean, Brother Gallup, sorry, and welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Do I unmute or will the host unmute me?
Hey, Steve. Good night.
Hey, Prince, what's up?
Okay.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hey, Corey.
Hey, good, Corey.
James, I don't know if you got, okay, I sent you the link via WhatsApp. So in case anyone wants to watch via the YouTube,
Oh, okay.
just send them the link and they can key in. Let me join, sorry.
Okay. I'll look for it. Right. Let's got a few messages as well.
Yeah, sure. All you just got to do is this one a bit. I don't think that I think they didn't set.
There's a YouTube link. There's a YouTube link. Hey guys, any word from Brother Graham? You got unmute. You got unmute, Steve.
I haven't heard him. I sent him all the contact details.
Okay, no problem.
I just wish to confirm again, will the host unmute us or do
Yeah.
we unmute? Or the host will know that.
They're gonna go through this, but Corey, could you please clarify? I don't want to speak out of turn. Are we supposed to go ahead?
Okay, because now you are a panelist, you can unmute yourself, right? We don't have to do that for you. Yes, we can if you want us to do, but you can mute and unmute for yourselves. But the attendees, on the other hand, they're the ones that would be. They're the ones that would be when they raise their hand, then we will unmute them and give them the capability to speak. But the panelists, you're able to mute and unmute for yourselves.
Okay.
Start again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see. Oh, I'm also gonna be paying attention to the chat and the question and answer. So me and when Hadley shows up, we're gonna be looking at the question and answer.
Brother Graham is here.
Brother Graham is here. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, and one other thing before we continue, because this is not the normal meeting setting that we are accustomed to. This is a webinar, so we have different capabilities, and one such is the Q&A segment. For some, on my device is at the top right-hand corner. For some, it will be in the bottom left-hand corner, and you will just see a Q&A within a square box. Now, what the presenters are presenting, and you have a question, you can touch the Q&A button, and you can type your question out, and you can send it to all the panelists, or if you want a specific panelist to answer a particular question, you can send it to that panelist. And when we come to the question and answer segment that James will be in control of, then he will reread the question so that everyone will hear the question, and then the appropriate panelist will answer the question. And then again, if you don't want to do that, you can raise your hand, and when James acknowledges you, then us, the host, myself or Renisha, we would give you the capability to speak. The reason why the mics are off at this point in time is to stop the necessary feedback. I think that's about it, James.
Yeah.
I'll hand it over to you.
I'm about to start. You want to say something to the attendees so that there's clarity?
Okay, and also too for the attendees, right? The question and answer box is merely for the attendees. Now, if the attendees want to answer a private question to one of the panelists, they can so do that, or the question can be open for any panelist to answer. Now, for the panelists, they have the option to answer the question privately, right? Or they can answer the question live, which basically will be open for everyone, to hear, etc. And also too, they have the option to dismiss whatever question, just let's assume the question might not be appropriate for the particular forum, etc. They do have that option. But for the attendees, if you want to say something when it comes to the question and answer segment, because you would not be allowed to say anything while the presentations are going on. As I said before, while the presenters are presenting and you have a question, you can click the Q&A box and type your question out and then send it. And when it comes to the question and answer segment, your question will be answered. No, if you don't want to do that, you can use the raise hand icon. And then when we get to the question and answer segment, you will be acknowledged by the host. And when we acknowledge you, then we will give you the capabilities to turn on the mic. And you can ask your question and then listen for the appropriate response. And after you ask the question, we would mute the mic. The reason why the mics are mute is to stop the necessary feedback. I think that's about it. Over to you, James.
Okay. Okay.
1 minute, James.
Yeah, sure.
The host, could someone assist Brother Graham? He's saying he can hear, but he can't see. I sent him a message, but if you can explain a little better for me.
That he
You can
can.
you can hear me now, James?
Of course I can hear you, Brother Graham. How you doing?
Yeah. No, how do I'm okay then. I can't see myself, but I don't know what happened there.
We can't see you either.
So what I gotta do?
Okay, there's a little icon in the top right hand corner of your screen.
Yeah.
That says that got 3 little dots.
Yeah.
And if you click on it, it will say stop video or start video. Do you want to start video so we can see you?
I see something called chat. Meeting settings, minimize meetings, raise hand, disconnect. That one?
No, doesn't it say anything about start video?
No, not that one.
Okay, is in. If can you see the thing that says Emerson Graham?
Yeah.
All right, then you're supposed to open. You're supposed to click on that, and it will say certain things. But one thing: mute my audio, stop video, rename, pin video, hide self view. You're supposed to start the video, stop or start video. In your case, it would be start.
Somebody came and said the host has asked you to start your video. I can say okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're there now then. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You look familiar.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So we're to get Prince gone now. Okay, can we start? Corey? Ronisha?
Yes, you can.
Yes, we can
Yes.
start. Yes.
All right. Do y'all need to do any more explaining to the participants? I want to start with a word of prayer and then
Yeah,
we'll
I
start
think they
rolling.
have it because
They have
it's the same as a regular meeting. So
Okay,
they
good.
know to raise their hand and then we would give them the capability to speak
All right.
or enable the
Sounds
audio.
good. All right. All right. So welcome everyone. Started a little late, but don't mind that. We're just making sure that everything is on the up. Right now, I just ask everyone here to bow their heads as we have a word of prayer to start this webinar. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for life, health, and strength. I want to thank you, Lord, that you've given us an understanding that we can come to you and that we can discuss with each other things of importance for our people. We ask you to be with us, be our guide, and be our moderator, so that everything that is said and done will bless others and will glorify you. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. He's not here yet. Okay. In my opening remarks, I just want to refer to Acts 28:19, when Paul appealed to Caesar. You see, the book of Acts tells us that Paul, he was not satisfied with that he was getting a fair deal. He felt he should have gotten a better break. So he decided that he would appeal to Caesar. This is an example of that we Christians in 2020 can follow. If we have concerns about any act or legislation of government, we can appeal to our government to get a hearing. It's not being hard, it's not being a rebel. All it is saying is that the same way Paul appealed to someone that he felt could help his cause, that's what we can do. That's what we're going to discuss this evening. You see, this evening we're going to discuss the Criminal Justice Miscellaneous Provisions Bill and the changes to it. And we are going to discuss how it affects us as a community of faith. Now, we've added some experts to our panel to ensure that we leave here with a better understanding of this important piece of legislation. I want to introduce them now. We have Professor Pedro Welch. He's a retired professor, but you know, one of a professor, always a professor. But he is a historian, and he will give us a good perspective on this and other types of bills. We have with us Brother Steve Dodd, who will be introducing and explaining the bill to us. He's an attorney of 20 plus years. And we have also Brother Emerson Graham. He is a former magistrate and he's a practicing attorney. And he also will help us to have an understanding. All of these persons, before I go even further, have an interest in religious liberty and the way our church should respond to any issues. Also, we have with us Brother Anthony Prince. He's a member of the Plural Executive of Barbados, and he will also have something to say. Me, I am your humble servant, James Seeley, and I am the Public Relations Officer for the Plural Executive, and I'm the Religious Liberty Leader for Government Hill Seventh-day Adventist Church. I am happy that we are able as a church to host this webinar. I want to, before we even start, thank the Government Hill media team for making it possible and the leadership of the church. But this time, without any further ado, I want to hand you over to our friend, Brother Gullop. We have another member of our panel that's going to be joining us a little late, Brother Hadley Sobers. He's also involved in his media, for his media services in his church, so he's going to be a little late. He'll join us soon. But at this time, I'm going to hand over to Brother Gullop. And I want to just say, I want us to remember three things. This is not a partisan political discussion. This is not a forum to make broadsides at any leader, past or present. And last but not least, this is a discussion that we hope that you will continue at your church. We're not finished here. We're starting a discussion that we're hoping that you will discuss at your church so that we can have a better understanding and that we can grow not just as Christians, but as good citizens. Over to you, Steve.
Okay. Good evening, all. Brothers and sisters, and any visitors. As James indicated, we are here this evening to discuss the Criminal Justice Miscellaneous Provisions Bill, the contents thereof, and the implications of this intended piece of legislation as it affects us as individuals and possibly as a wider church community, and the extent to which this statute itself and perhaps the circumstances surrounding its passage thus far could be an indicator, the extent to which this could be an indicator for things to come. Now, this statute, no, it's not a statute yet. This bill, because it's only passed the lower house of Parliament, the House of Assembly, was brought before was dated April 24th, 2020, excuse me, and it passed the lower house on the following day, Friday, April 24th, 2020. It went through the House quite speedily, from the first reading, second reading, committee stage to passage, discussion, and the like. And what this bill seeks to do is to alter certain parts of our criminal justice system that I deem to be extremely important, in that they provide safeguards to all accused persons, and these safeguards redound to the essential element of fairness and balance within our criminal justice system. Let me make a few basic remarks and suggest you certain fundamental basics within a criminal justice system. Justice is not about punishment. Too many of us, when we hear the word, we think about punishing people. The justice is about fairness. It is about mercy, it's about compassion, and giving a man his due. It means we don't rush to punish. We take our time, ensure that before we punish, there's ample reason or there's ample evidence to justify taking drastic steps, whether it be imprisonment, deprivation of property, or in the most extreme case, depriving of life. So when we hear justice systems, I would want to suggest that we ought not to think first of all about punishment, but we must first think about fairness. Now, within our criminal justice system, like many others within the Western world, there are certain basic assumptions. The first one is that a man is presumed innocent until he is proven otherwise, beyond reasonable doubt. Not a shadow of a doubt, but beyond reasonable doubt. Innocent until proven otherwise, beyond reasonable doubt. Which means that when someone is accused of a crime, he does not have anything to prove. He does not have to prove his innocence. He can be brought, he can stay in the trial and say absolutely nothing. That's his right. He has nothing to prove because we start with the assumption that he is innocent. Those accusing him must bring evidence to displace that assumption. And the standard to do so is quite high. Disabuse your minds again for what you see on television. That is entertainment. That does not reflect reality at all. It very rarely does. So where you see an accused person cross-examining other witnesses and so forth, that hardly takes place in reality because he does not have to do that. Now, allied to that notion of the presumption of innocence is the fact that if an accused person, and this was the position before the passage of this bill, and a person accused of a criminal offense, after the prosecution has presented its case, the judge or the magistrate gives the accused person three options. He can remain in the dock, that is the place where the accused person stands or sits during the course of a trial. He can stay there and say nothing. It's his right. Or he can remain in the dock and give what we call an unsworn statement. When he gives this unsworn statement, he is not cross-examined by anyone. And that evidence, that statement, is to be given equal weight to any other evidence that preceded it in court. The third option is that he can go to the witness stand and give evidence. If he takes that option, however, he will subject himself to be cross-examined by the prosecutor. Now, what this bill proposes is that it removes the right of accused persons to give unsworn statements from the dock. That's in indictable matters that come before a judge and a jury. So far, where matters are tried before the magistrate, relatively minor matters, it appears that right remains untouched. So this bill seeks to remove that right from accused persons now, and they are no force, if they decide to give their side, to go on the witness stand and be exposed to cross-examination. One of the other significant changes that this bill proposes is to remove the requirement remove the necessity of unanimous verdicts in order to secure convictions for murder. The requirement is, this bill now proposes that a majority of 9 would suffice to secure a conviction of murder. And those are the two central planks of this bill that we'll focus on this evening. And I am suggesting that this bill has the potential to make significant changes to our criminal justice system. And what is of greater concern to myself and my colleagues is that this bill was not placed in the public square for discussion, particularly among key stakeholders. It was rushed through Parliament, I will submit, at a time when persons were more concerned, I don't want to say distracted, by the public health crisis that we are currently faced with. And when governments take approaches like that, where it uses its powers in emergency situations, where it uses its majority, as is the case in Barbados, where the government has all the seats in Parliament, all 30. When government uses its position like that, or takes advantage of its position like that, one must raise alarm bells, one must be concerned. Because rights are not removed in one fell swoop. Historically, individual rights, human rights are gradually eroded slowly and imperceptibly, where persons take little notice or show little concern until, unfortunately, it's too late. And I am submitting that a bill as important as this, that where it can be moved through the lower house in the space of one day without the public having being specifically informed to invite discussion and the like, I find that approach by the government of Barbados to be very unfortunate. It borders on being insidious because it begs the question, what else could they do in the position that they're in terms of their majority? And what else could they do in circumstances where we are facing a public health crisis and they are armed with emergency powers? And also with the notion, with the apparent public support, where persons leave the government to run the place because they somehow feel that Big Brother knows best, especially in crises like these. So those are some of the central issues or central implications that this bill raises. And in the course of the evening, I hope we can expand thereon and discuss it in a much fuller manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's quite extensive, and it helps us to have a very good understanding of what's happening here. At this time, I'm going to ask Brother Prince to bring a perspective on this as well, from a prophetic standpoint. He has a few minutes to do that. Then we'll hear from Brother Welch, Brother Graham, and then we'll take it all to everyone else. Go ahead, Brother Prince.
I like to want to say good night to everyone, those who are near and those who are far. I'm going to just give a very brief prophetic perspective on what is happening at this time. I believe that based on the changes and actions we are seeing, which are basically unprecedented to most of us, the stage is set for the end time Bible prophecy events to unfold. Some strange things are happening in the world. What was once protected is no longer guaranteed. It's no longer guaranteed to continue to be protected. We saw some things became expendable due to the present situation, and religious liberty is just as expendable as any other liberty that we may have had. Due to the need to keep people safe, we will see laws that are unfamiliar or even unconstitutional being enforced. I believe they will not happen one time, but they will happen gradually to give people time to get used to them. But you can be rest assured they will not go back to what they used to be. Where can this pandemic be placed in the prophetic scheme of things? It is not one of the last 7 plagues. since a universal law must be passed before the plagues can fall. But we must look at the relation to worship before the plagues can fall. Okay. But COVID-19 fits into the general scheme of things that Jesus said would serve as a sign that a great time of trouble was approaching. You know, when we look at it, we see diseases. We see some even old diseases that we thought that were eradicated have reemerged, and there's no cure for them. We are currently witnessing, again, throughout the world, people falling from all sorts of things. The mark of the beast will not be some chip in a computer, as a lot of people are saying. We see a drive for the more digital currency since people are scared of being infected by monies that are being touched. But what is very significant, we see prominent religious leaders want to have political influence with the intention of turning people towards God. Some of their objectives, I must admit, are good, and there are sincere people who are working with them. But when the political influence and power they seek has been gained, as we see with Donald Trump, a certain danger would emerge. If they are pressed by an existential emergency, that's an emergency that threatens human life, they will enact laws and orders that will go so far and beyond that which is required by man. They will require men to disobey God's law, as we read in Revelation chapter 13 and Psalm 94:20. In closing, we are beginning to see, when we put all of this together, an unfolding of Bible prophecy before our very eyes. But as far as prophecy is concerned, we recognize that there are those who have a wrong theology who are causing people to look in the wrong direction. So we must encourage people to study their Bibles deeply so that they know where we stand as far as prophecy is concerned, and that they're not led astray by many of these things that we're hearing that the Bible does not speak about. That's it.
Over to you, Brother Alex.
Thank you very much. Good night to everyone. I also send my greetings to those who may be in virtual land. Permit me to offer a few historical perspectives on the question before us. In the first place, we need to acknowledge laws are never passed in a vacuum. All laws are passed within a particular circumstance, so that we need to look at what we may call the social, economic, and political background, and even the cultural issues that underlie. It may be useful for us to note that we need to be careful about putting absolute trust in any government. It does not matter whether the government is one that we support or otherwise. We must avoid at all, as Christians, we must be absolutely careful about surrendering our critique and our right to question to any party, any group. This Caribbean in which we live had a relatively recent origin as far as laws that protect religious freedom and religious liberty will be concerned. In 1689, the Declaration Act, which extended freedom of worship to some groups, but with some restrictions to people known as nonconformists, that is Methodists, Baptists, and also to Jews and others. Those laws were extended to the Caribbean, but as we know, historical narrative, people like Sarah Angill and others felt the wrath of the authorities at the time, even though there was a Toleration Act. we move past their time and we come to the time of abolition, emancipation. The British government passed an act of abolition in England in 1834 and House of Assembly to pass its own local act. But what happened was that in these Caribbean countries, notwithstanding the alleged or assumed supremacy of British law, laws were passed that circumscribed the freedom of Caribbean people. In Barbados, there was the Masters and Servants Act in 1838. It was not repealed until 1937 in Barbados. In several other Caribbean countries, the same thing happened. Now we come to closer to our period, and we have in most Caribbean countries, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the constitutional states, inter alia, hereby recognized and declared that they have existed and shall continue to exist without discrimination by reason of race, origin, color, religion, or sex, the following fundamental human rights and freedoms, namely freedom of conscience and observance, freedom of thought and expression. In the case of Barbados, the Constitution follows a similar path to that of Trinidad and Tobago. In this latter case, the Constitution of Barbados guarantees freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, freedom of assembly, and I wish to take note of that issue we call freedom, because although it might sound as a bit of an oxymoron, the fact is that when we have a rule or an ordinance that is put in place that says that only 10 of us can meet in a particular location, or 20, one understands the purpose and the reason for that, implications beyond what we are seeing. So although the Constitution guarantees freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association, we also recognize that the Constitution also recognizes that there may be occasion, and it does mention in the Constitution at various points, it does mention that if there is, for example, to the health of the nation, that it may be possible to restrict a person's right to association and assembly. It is clear, therefore, that that notwithstanding the generally good-natured governments that we have had in Barbados over the last several years, we cannot, as Christians, assume that everything that any government will do, any House of Assembly will do, will necessarily be in our best interests. Now, the criminal justice bill that was passed, or rather that was put in the House, as Brother Steve told us, that creates a bit of a dilemma, because that criminal justice bill, while it might have some elements in it, some clauses that might appear to offer some advantage to an accused, at the same time, it also removes from that accused person joy before. And I'm not suggesting that somebody who is guilty of murder should be let off. But in the past, you needed a unanimous decision of the jury. But if you're saying now it is by majority of a jury, a majority decision, know that you can be sent to prison or whatever, then that has implications for the accused. And if it can happen in the case of the accused, one wonders what else can happen. I'm going to close very shortly, but come back to the COVID-19 issue. Just let me say to you that I have to the pronouncements by various people in this COVID time. And we have a policeman who is reported, and I don't know how true this is, the validity of the statement, but who is reported to have seen somebody in the gallery, and who is reported to have said to that person, go inside. Now, I couldn't understand that. Then I overheard heard on the radio an official of the law enforcement group declaring that should not fly kites. Now, I understand the issue of a noisy bull on a kite disturbing all the people, but I cannot understand how flying a kite has anything to do with COVID. But the fact remains that since people what they call adversarial position relative to the freedoms that we have normally enjoyed, I'm saying that the time has come for us as Christians to see every action of every government, whether it's in Barbados, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's where the USA, to see every action as having the potential. I will stop there until further discussion.
Okay, Brother Wells, thank you very much for that perspective. Brother Graham? Just unmute your mic.
Yeah, I said good night to all. I agree essentially with everything that was said by those who spoke before me. Except to say that, you know, we have a situation in Barbados that we've never had before. And that is a situation where the government is, you know, essentially a one-sided government, 30-0. I do not know if the early, you know, framers of our laws, you know, anticipated the situation at this one, because it is new to us, and it has given the government a lot of power. It has given the government almost absolute power. And so what happened in relation to this bill can happen with anything now. And the question that maybe we ought to be answering is should we have some provision in our laws, maybe in our constitution, to ensure that this situation does not occur again? Now, is democracy, the mere fact that one side has gained in all of the seats and the other side has gained none, is democracy at work. But it is democracy that maybe is going to cause issues in relation to our rights. Because the minute that you've given a government absolute power, the government is going to use that power. And so my fear is that this should never happen again. We should never have an election where all of these seats go to one side. Because if you do that, and that's exactly what's happening in Barbados, we're going to have problems. And the speed at which this bill passed through the lower house happened because they could do it. You know, there's no law that says that it can't be done. They were within the law when they did it. And if it, and so I think that we, as members of the Religious Liberty Association, we need from time to time to look at what is happening in Barbados. But I still maintain that that there's not much that we can do in relation to what the government is doing and what the government can do, provided that the government does what it wants to do within the framework of the law as it exists at this present time. And I'm saying that what happened that night is and was within the framework of the law, and therefore we have to look at that and we have to deal with that. And my view is that we have maybe to advance a position that should not happen again. And I believe if it doesn't happen again, then it means that somebody would need to have the will in this present parliament to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you all. I just want to remind you that we are monitoring your questions. We're going to be responding. I'm going to be passing all your questions to the panelists. And also, if you want to actually speak, we want you to raise your hand. There's a little raise hand thing. Don't do what I'm doing. Actually raise your hand. There's a raise hand icon that you can use if you want to ask any of the panelists or the whole panel a question. All right. Thank you, Brother Graham. No, I want us to be aware of the fact that some people may wonder, why are we making a fuss about the Criminal Justice Act? We're not criminals, we're good Christian law-abiding citizens. That is true. But watch this. The same way that someone else's rights can be abridged, it can happen to us. And as Prince pointed out, that's why we want to talk from the perspective of the history and prophecy, that one, it has happened before, and two, based on prophecy, it will happen again. So let us not decide that because we're not criminals, quote unquote, that we don't have to worry about it. We have to worry about it because it's important to us as persons of faith. Brother Graham raised a very important point about how we need to be able to speak to power, speak truth to power, so to speak, to discuss these issues. And I will say that we have to also be very mindful of how we engage our political directorate. I said it in our last webinar, I keep saying it. Our church needs to find a constructive and positive way to engage our political directorate. And it should not happen only in cases where we are frightened for something or fighting for something, but it should be an ongoing process where when something like this happens, we can be able to connect and engage our leadership in a positive way. Anyway, let's go to our question and answer session. I'm sure that the panel has no problem with that, so we will get straight to that. Don't forget, you're supposed to raise your hand, but I'm going to read the first few questions here. All right, this is from Leonard Phillips, and he asks, are we witnessing a trend where governments around the world are using periods of crisis to push legislation that rolls back certain fundamental rights and freedoms of their citizens? You heard me, right, panelists?
Yeah.
Again, are we witnessing a trend where governments around the world are using periods of crisis to push legislation that roll back certain fundamental rights and freedoms for their citizens? Over to you.
The point that I'm making here is that government, well, I'm not looking at governments around the world, I'm looking at the Barbados government. Because of the majority that they have, they could have done anything. They didn't have to wait until the pandemic was coming on to do it. They could have done it at night. They could have done it Sunday. They could have done it at bank holiday. They could have done anything, and that's what scares me, because we can lose all of our rights. The way that we are in Barbados at this stage, the government can wake up tomorrow and decide to change every provision in the Constitution without any debate or any such thing, because they have absolute majority. They have total majority. They have absolute power, and so we will get through this term of Parliament, God willing, without anything like that happening. But I'm saying that they can do it within the law, and we can talk about it. We can meet and discuss it. But the government has the power to do it, and that is what really scares me.
I have a hand up from Brother Welch. Brother Welch.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, I really was responding to Magistrate Graham's presentation to make the point that following the last general election, when the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, commented on the electoral result, she had in fact said that there ought to be a constitution to deal with this issue. I followed what she had said and submitted 2 full-page submissions on the Barbados Constitution as it related to the question of having an opposition leader. I've had favorables, in fact, there were 2 submissions that I made in both in the Barbados Advocate and the Nation newspaper. and I've had very favorable comment from some of the senior legal luminaries of Barbados on what they said. What I had argued is that the constitution that we had in Barbados did not conceive of a situation where you could have an opposition leader or majority of one, meaning himself. That is unconstitutional. And I submitted and argued in my submission to newspapers that you could not appoint a single person who in a parliament unless, as the Constitution requires, that person has a majority of those who do not support the government. You must read the Constitution if you read it carefully. You see that. Now I'm saying all of this to say that from the moment that a decision was made to appoint the current leader of the opposition, it was clear to me that there were some persons who were willing to invent the constitutional requirement and to put in place what they thought was a palatable alternative. But the issue is that it is and it remains unconstitutional. And I would challenge any lawyer, anywhere, anytime, to look at the Constitution and tell me that the arrangement that's currently in place, in fact, it is unconstitutional. Now, I'm saying all of this to say that what's happening across the world and in Barbados is not unique. We must expect it to happen. China, USA, former Soviet Union, throughout the Caribbean, all governments everywhere do what they can. And that may sound strange, but it simply means that if you give people the opportunity to do what they want to do, they will do it at some point. All we can do is hope that common sense will prevail. But Master Graham said that there's a lot we can do. I am not a member of any of the local political parties, but I think that some of us are too silent. And I'm not saying we should go there and shake government or shake people up, but we have to have the bravery to get up there and to call out things. This gentleman in Parliament, Caswell Franklin, I could call his name because I'm not going to say libelous. He drew to the attention of the Barbados public that something was wrong with an appointment. And if he is seeing that, I'm saying there are other things that we can. I don't want the lawyers to tell me that they have some discredit because this bill, this criminal justice amendment bill was passed in a short time. Don't just tell me in the Adventist church and outside of the church to get up and say something, because I'm hearing you now, but I'm not been hearing the lawyers. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Wow. All right. Over to you, Steve. Sorry.
Now, added to what Brother Welch has said, we must first, I start with the principle that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So where you have a situation where, as exists in Barbados, there is always the potential there for that amount of power being wielded by one party to be abused. And as was said by both Brother Welch and Brother Graham, the current government as it stands, they can do whatever. The Constitution of Barbados can, by reason of the current makeup of Parliament, can be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. And it already has been. One of the first acts the government did was to adjust the requirements for persons sitting in the upper house, persons who were not, to adjust the requirement for persons who were residing outside of Barbados to accommodate a particular person. Right? That's one of their first acts to amend the Constitution to adjust the qualification for sitting in the upper house. And this, of course, that should have signaled to persons looking on that, look, there's something fundamentally wrong with so much power being invested in so few hands, right? Now, I agree with Brother Graham that there ought to be some safeguard against this kind of abuse of power. And as I see it, and we had a discussion about this recently, as I see it, the only way, or rather one way of confronting this problem is to adjust the electoral system, adjust the electoral system itself. Our method of election is first past the post. Whoever gets the majority votes, or the majority votes cast, will get all the seats. Unfortunately, that provides for a very stable government, but unfortunately, it does not provide for a representative government. The composition of parliament does not reflect the popular vote. A system like proportional representation, as it exists in Guyana, more accurately reflects the wishes of the electorate in terms of the popular vote, because each party is allocated seats according to the number of votes cast for them. But that is a system that we are not familiar with, but it could go a long way in curbing a problem such as this, where one party gets all the seats in parliament. Realistically, I honestly don't think the framers of the Constitution contemplated a situation where one party would gain all the seats. But a system like ours, first past the post, the potential is there. We've never had a situation where one party won all the seats, but we've had a case of one party winning 24 and the other party winning 3. We've had a situation where one got 26, the other one got 2. So there is potential there for one side to get all the seats in parliament. Now, the question was also, I think one of the questions asked was whether during crises like these, we see governments taking these kinds of bold steps that border on abuse, where persons' rights are gradually whittled away. Most definitely. We will all remember in the wake of 9/11 and the fear of terrorism and so on, fear of flying, the enormous security measures that were put in place by governments all over the world, the US leading the way. We know how much of a headache it is now to travel. We know of instances where the US has heightened its security, where they're listening to on people's phone calls, monitoring their emails and social media platforms, all in the name of security, national security. So governments have tended to use circumstances like these, crises like these, to say, well, look, we will take on additional powers in order to protect society. Now, what I would say in addition to that, however, and Brother Welch alluded to it earlier, that no human right is absolute. And there are circumstances where human rights must be limited. And those include crises of public health, public safety, public defense, public morals, and the need to protect the rights of others. So my right to gather and assemble and move around Barbados freely must not be so absolute if my doing so is or could be a danger to other persons. We had a situation recently where persons at a church gathered in a group of 20 odd, and the reports have come back that 5 of them have tested positive so far. Now, my own view is that act by them was an act of selfish recklessness. That's not the exercise, that's not the responsible exercise of human rights there, because they know we are dealing with a virus which is spread by human contact and so on. So in my view, a sensible person, a Christian who is concerned or should put others before himself, should not be engaged in a behavior like this. All right. So in these circumstances, yes, it is the state's duty and right to constrain certain human rights, because there's an overarching public crisis where the existence of the state or society is under imminent threat. But they cannot do this whimsically, nor can they do it indefinitely. We must always be on the watch to ensure that where governments take power onto themselves, that these measures or these powers are exercised within the confines of the law and are exercised reasonably and in the public interest.
Okay, we have some questions, and I want to get through them as quickly as possible. Now, Simone Grant, who's the other questioner, has asked, how does the change in legislation compare to the legislation in other countries? Do we have anything to compare it to? How does the change in legislation compare to the legislation in other countries? Panel.
Maybe Steve can answer that.
A lawyer with, who is trained in international law will have to answer that. I don't think any. I mean,
Steve might be able to answer that one.
Sorry, I missed that one. Sorry, I was looking at another.
I said I'm going to defer to you to answer that one.
No, well, let me go back here. How does the change in legislation compare to the legislation in other countries?
Oh yes, I saw that question earlier and I made a few notes. Now, the OECS, they have enacted similar pieces of legislation where they remove this right the right to give unsworn statements by accused persons. All right. Now, I am not certain of the circumstances that led to that result, but I will say this: if I were a betting man, I would put money on the fact that those pieces of legislation did not go through their parliaments in the space of one day. All right, and that's what causes so much concern about our statute. Right. Secondly, simply because other people are doing it, does not mean we should do the same thing. All right. We have to look at our own circumstances and determine whether this thing is right for us or not. Now, there's a question I saw here by Martin. The question is, in a court of law in Barbados, is not all the evidence for the Crown given on oath and tested? What disadvantage is it then to the accused if he must give sworn testimony if he exercises his right to speak? Right? Now, that question is tied to the previous one, and I will say this. The most important person in any criminal trial is not the complainant. The most important person in any criminal trial is the accused, right? Because at the end of it, he stands to lose his liberty, or in extreme cases, his life. So built into the system, there must be fairness to him at every single step. I'm not saying he must have an advantage, but there must be fairness. Now, the evidence brought by the prosecution is given on the oath, and it must be tested, because what you are asking the court to do is deprive this person of their liberty because you are claiming that they did performed a criminal act against you. And that is no mean thing. All right? Let me give you an example. Any female attending this webinar now can go to the nearest police station in Barbados and say that any one of us men here may rate her on such and such a day. And if that person is convincing to the police who takes her statement, to the court and jury if the matter goes to trial, that is all that it takes to deprive any one of us males of our liberty. So again, a justice system is not about punishment, and even less about rushing to punish. So when you're talking about accused persons, there's a difference between an accused person and the difference between a criminal. A criminal who is one who has had a record of wrongdoing that has been tested in court, and it is confirmed that, look, he did this act on such and such a day, and so on and so on and so forth. An accused is just that. Somebody is accusing you of doing something. It has not been confirmed yet. And whenever someone is accused, your reputation is at stake. So one must be given every single facility to protect your reputation. And in every criminal trial, we start with the assumption that the accused person is innocent. That has to be displaced by cogent evidence beyond reasonable doubt. All right. So to say that he has an advantage by not saying anything, all right, it is to misunderstand the purpose of the whole criminal justice system itself. Now, in Barbados in particular, accused persons must be protected because more often than not, many of them come to court without having the benefit of being represented by a lawyer. So if an accused person wants to give his side of the story, and mind you, he doesn't have to, but if he wishes to do so, the only facility available to him now will be to go on the witness stand and expose himself to questioning, to the scrutiny of a trained lawyer. And he is not. You imagine a fella that live in the country, all right, grew up in Cairns, drunk him all, never did anything wrong in his life, never teeth a piece of cane. And somebody accused him of doing something nefarious. He comes to court for the first time, strange place, strange language, all that thing. And he's adamant that, look, I have not done this thing. And his only way of giving his side is to go on the witness box and be exposed to a trained lawyer. He'll be torn to pieces. All right. So those safeguards must be safeguards built into the system to protect persons like him. All right. This whole notion that a lot of guilty people go free and so on, that is a misnomer engendered by Hollywood entertainment again. All right. So when we are seeking to punish people, we have to be very, very careful and slow to do so, because you are depriving this. What you're asking the system to do is to deprive this person of one of the basic fundamental rights. All right. So we must not be so eager to be part of the band crow saying, stone her like the woman found in adultery, or crucify him, and so on. We have to be very, very careful.
Jen.
Okay. 1 minute, please. I want to answer these questions as they come, if you don't mind. Okay. And I start here also. Let me see. Good. Right. All right. The next question now is from Benny Lord, who asks, so what can be done in the future to prevent having one party having all the votes under democratic society? Not sure I'm even in the position to do that, but I think that Wendy's question deserves an answer. What can be done in the future to prevent
Stephen asked that question already.
Right, okay.
But you answer that question by talking about the
proportional representation.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay,
you can
and
have
then
a constitutional amendment that can mix. You can have a two-tier system. You can have a certain number of seats reserved to be of proportional representation, and another set of seats which can be allocated on the basis of the first. So there are various systems that can be put in place. But the question was answered before.
Yeah, and I think that that we have to also recognize that's something that we've been discussing for a long time. But we have to recognize one thing. Governments never give up power. So I'm not sure how soon we will be able to get a government to give up power. And that's not an attack on any government. It's a fact. Okay, the next question then is for Brother Prince or Brother Welch from Leonard Phillip. In the Great Controversy, we are told that the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church would exert themselves in the legislative halls. Are we witnessing here in Barbados a shift to the inquisitorial system of justice, in which magistrates and judges examine the accused to determine guilt or innocence rather than juries? If so, is this a positive trend for Barbados? Wow. All right. Great Controversy says that the Roman Catholic Church will exert themselves in the legislative halls. Are we witnessing here in Barbados a shift to the inquisitorial system of justice? Brother Prince, Brother Welch, please unmute.
I do not think that I do not think that we can say that, as has been explained before. What we're saying in Barbados at the moment is a government who has supreme power and authority, right? So they're just using their power and authority to enact the laws that they want. But as Brother Welch has said, this is a situation where we in the church, if we have to become the voice, as a matter of fact, we must speak out against social injustices and against human rights. So in this particular case, it is a case where majority is the one that is carrying the sway. So I do not see at this point in time in Barbados where our judicial system is going towards an inquisitorial approach. It may happen later. But as Steve would have said also, I do not think that the government would be silly at this time to do such, because the realities is that if you do not introduce things gradually, where people get accustomed and you want to introduce them overnight, people become alarmed and politicians will not do anything to harm themselves. One of the other problems we face, let me look at the United States, where you have a whole group of politicians who give the president counsel. So when they give the president counsel, they will give them counsel pertaining to the religion or whatever they believe. So that is one of the dangers that we face. So we're not facing a situation like that in Barbados at the moment, but we're facing a situation where in reality, because of the principles of democracy, the government is basically doing as it wants. And as Brother Welch has been said, we've got to look at a different system, and the church must speak out against these injustices.
Yeah. All right. All right. Let's go to the next question, because they're coming fast and furiously. I see a raised hands. I'll get to that, but I just want to get these off as quickly as possible. Okay. So they're talking about the Criminal Justice Act. Edwin Hunt, he's asking who would benefit from the decisions made and what can we look forward to? What can we expect then from this act? Steve, it seems as if you and Brother Graham got a lot of answers to give to this.
Okay. First of all, let me declare that I'm not I don't practice criminal law. I've never practiced criminal law before, but I have a general idea of how the criminal law works. And my second declaration is that I do not necessarily agree with Steve in relation to the section that deals with the accused man not being able to be cross-examined. Sorry, not being able to give a statement and not be cross-examined. Now, Steve gave a pretty clear indication as to what transpires in the court, and that is that the accused man is in the dock. That's who he is, and he has these options that are given to him by the judge or the magistrate, as the case may be. One option is that he can remain where he is in the dock and say nothing. He has a right to silence, and therefore he can remain in the dock and say absolutely nothing. And though the prosecution would have put his case, and he would have heard the prosecution's case, he can determine, look, I am not saying anything, and he's going to leave it for the jury to determine whether to accept what the prosecution brought or decide to interpret his not saying anything as to his innocence. Now, he's also given the option to remain in the dock and to give a statement. And there is where I think that Steve and I kind of disagree, because my view is this: is that when he stays in the dock, he's heard the case being put by the other side. He's heard all of the witnesses who came on the oath and they said whatever they said about him, and he knows that he's innocent or he knows that he's guilty. In my view, if he is innocent, he should be glad to get an opportunity to put his case and to put it and be cross-examined on it. Because if he just puts his case and sits down, he gets up and he says, sir, I did not commit that offense, and sit down. And he expects the jury now, having heard all of what the prosecution said, and heard him said, just, I did not commit that offense, and sit down. He puts the jury, and if it's in the magistrate's court, he puts the magistrate in a difficult position, because he has in his mind to determine, am I going to discard everything that was said by the prosecution and just agree with this man because he said he didn't do it? In my view, if he did not do what he's charged, he did not commit the offense to which he's charged, he should be glad to go on the witness stand and say, well, look, I did not do it. And then allow the prosecutor to cross-examine him on that statement. And if he's telling the truth, in my view, he can defend himself. He doesn't have to be a lawyer. If he's telling the truth, it's easy to tell the truth. I believe it's hard to tell lies, but it's easy to tell the truth. And he is there, and all these questions are coming at him. The best prosecutor cannot cause him to tell lies. He will terrify him, but in my view, he does not make him tell lies. He sticks to the truth because he knows the truth. He's the person who is truth. And he's saying that what I said here this morning is the truth. You can ask me whatever questions you want to ask me. It is the truth. And I believe, therefore, that he should, if he wants to put his side of the story, he should have to defend it on the cross-examination by the prosecution. But I don't agree to just sit down there and just say, well, I didn't do it, sit down and expect that is enough to quit himself.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're all adults here, and I don't expect everybody to agree with everything I say. I certainly don't agree with everything everyone says. So Brother Graham is perfectly placed to disagree with me. I don't have a problem with that. As he said, we discussed this before, and we differ. Now, if a guy is convinced of his innocence and he is determined to tell the truth, that's fine. But it doesn't always operate that way in the realities of the courtroom. A witness can be confident in his story, but when a lawyer starts to ask him certain questions and ask him when a lawyer seeks to connect the dots as to what a witness says, or ask him to make the connections to the evidence he brought, the witness can some witnesses panic, some witnesses become confused, and this can also be because of what they themselves say. And when you put it to them that, look, what you said from point A doesn't lead you to point B, C, D, E, F, G. So even a witness who is honest and convinced of his innocence and the truth of what he's saying, he can be unraveled on the cross-examination. All right. And so, in my view, an accused person, especially one which typically comes before the court. I ain't talking about some guy one that always in court every 2 minutes. I ain't talking about these seeker fellas. But the guy who is not known to the courts, there is very little protection for him now, especially if he's unrepresented. All right. Now, there was a question that I saw in the answer section. It was posed by an anonymous attendee. He says, if a right is not absolute, as you have stated, I'm assuming he's referring to me, how is it that we think the limitations of the criminal justice bill are so egregious? Now, let me deal with that first. Yes, I've said that no right is absolute, and there are limitations to human rights, but those limitations are imposed during times of crisis, national crisis, where there are issues of public safety, public health, public morals, or where there's a risk that the exercise of one person's right is likely to infringe on another person's. For example, my right to property does not permit me to go and steal someone else's. Okay? My right to free conscience and worship and so on does not permit me to commit illegal acts. For example, it does not permit me to have in my possession and use narcotic drugs, which I may deem as part of a sacrament, marijuana and so forth, right? So those are the limitations that we are talking about, right? Now, what this bill proposes is to alter fundamentally certain safeguards that are built into the criminal justice system, which protect an accused person. There's no crisis here. There's no public safety issue that we're trying to address. We are simply removing this thing carte blanche. We're simply removing the right to give an unsworn statement simplicity, right? So fundamental human rights are limited in our Constitution in times of crisis or where there's a risk that the exercise of rights by one person is likely or risk of violating or infringing the rights of another person. The second part of the question, in addition, can someone show me from the Constitution where it is guaranteed that a criminal would be allowed to make an unsworn statement and that one ought to be convicted by a majority vote? Now, these rights are not contained in the Constitution of Barbados itself. They don't need to. The right to give an unsworn statement from the dock by an accused person was a right contained in our Evidence Act. And the requirement to have a unanimous verdict to secure a conviction for murder was contained in the Juries Act, two separate and distinct pieces of legislation, right? You see, not every right has to be contained or can be contained in the Constitution itself. A constitution of a country sets very broad parameters, and then it empowers Parliament to pass subordinate legislation now to deal with certain peculiar issues, right? So the Constitution is almost like the foundation of a house, and you build the floor, the walls, the windows, everything rests on that. Okay.
Okay.
So I hope that answers, Mr. Anonymous Attendee, I hope that answers your question.
No, I have to, we have to move quickly. I realize that time is really moving quicker than we are. But I have Leonard Phillips who is saying that he didn't get a satisfactory answer from Brother Welch and Brother Prince. He thinks that maybe the lawyers can answer him. I guess y'all are.
Brother Welch did not answer. Brother Welch did not answer.
Well, please do. See if we can help him out.
I know that my brother, who I respect, answered him, but the fact remains that his question really had to do with the fact, and he's asking if we are witnessing here in Barbados a shift to the inquisitorial system of justice, which magistrates and judges examine. Current amendments that have been proposed in the bill do not, in fact, remove a trial by jury. So it is not a shift towards the magistrate and the as we should say, and to judges. That's not where it goes at all. We must also be very careful about assuming that theologically that the Roman Catholic Church will have a very strong influence in the various systems of justice that will emerge at some point. It doesn't mean that we must begin to look into every law that is passed in our various countries to see whether there's a Roman Catholic influence somewhere or if it is a pattern. So I think careful, but there's no doubt, and I just want to end by saying this, that as Christians, as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, we have to be careful about implicit trust in any system. And I said that earlier on, we have to be careful. We must assume that any government that is not led by Christ himself has to do our rights. That's all I can say to you.
Brother Leonard, are you satisfied now with the answer to the question? Host, you can let him you can let him answer. Brother Leonard, are you happy now to answer the question?
Okay, I understand what Dr. Welch just said, and I also understood what Brother Prince was saying. However, if you have a situation where your jury system, you've moved from unanimous now to a majority, I'm just wondering if that is not, to some extent, weakening the jury system. Plus, I have been informed that in some jurisdictions, there is a reduction in the use of juries. You have very often people who are brought before the courts, they engage in plea bargaining or they plead guilty as a way of lessening the sentence that they experience. So it seems to me that at least in some jurisdictions, there is a reduction in the use of juries. And to me, it seems as though this development in Barbados is tending in that direction. And as to the point Brother Welch made about being careful, I was just quoting one of the respected authorities in Adventism, where she says that the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church, philosophical and legal, would exert their influence in the legislative halls. Now, the legislative halls, I believe that would be within the courts. Now, if that is so, then maybe what we are seeing in perhaps a limited way is a shift toward that direction.
Let me respond a bit on that one. And the question I'm asking really is this, is that a magistrate sitting by himself can impose a sentence of up to 5 years. And a judge sitting with a jury can impose a sentence higher than, up to probably whatever. Now, there's a fear in Barbados, and I've heard it said by many people, that the criminal element is now able to infiltrate juries, where you can have one juror being connected to some gang or being threatened by some gangster or whatever the case may be. And his role is to make sure that there is no unanimous verdict. He is not at all concerned about the evidence. He is there to ensure that there is no unanimous verdict. I've heard that said, I don't know if it's true. But let's assume that that situation exists in Barbados. Then you can understand that a number of guilty will walk away free. Because all you need to do is to get one person on that jury who decides, I am not bringing back a guilty verdict. I am not bringing back a guilty verdict. I am not bringing back a guilty verdict. And the accused man walks free. And if what I'm saying is true, then it means that there have been a number of guilty persons in Barbados who have walked away free. And that same man, if he had come up against a magistrate on a lesser offense, may have been found guilty. And I believe then that the amendment is to try to deal with that situation where one person can hold up a jury and can allow a guilty person to walk free. Now, obviously, there's a converse to that one. And somebody's going to say, well, that one man might be the one who's right and the rest might be wrong. And that is also true as well. But I think in most cases, especially now that we're hearing stories of these guys in prison being able to get people to do things for them outside of prison. Yeah. And so on. So these might just be stories that people tell at night, but they may also be genuine stories of what is actually happening in Barbados. And I'm saying that the law therefore has to change with the times. Otherwise, you'll find that there are some people in Barbados who will never ever go before jury and get locked up because you can't get the jury, all of the members of the jury, to agree on a guilty verdict.
Okay. I hope that helps, brother Leonard. We have to move on to the other questions, but I'll say this though, also in response to Brother Graham.
I would like to make an introduction as well after you finish, James.
Yeah, my concern as a religious liberty activist and advocate, right, is to say the minute that that we people who worship funny get in the way of authorities. I'm not saying that it's going to happen now. I'm not saying this government has that in mind, but I'm saying the minute that we get in the way of unscrupulous authorities who believe that that they need to fix stuff, we wouldn't have a chance because the Criminal Justice Act has eased their hands enough to persecute us. And I'll tell you something, a lot of things have been, a lot of evil has been done by well-meaning legislators who were just trying to make things right in society. And as such, I think that while what you're saying is true, we have to keep that in mind, that well-meaning persons could also their actions can be used to squeeze persons and persecute persons in the future. Go ahead, Steve.
Now, I see it a little differently to Brother Graham. And I will say that we cannot act on stories. I'm not suggesting that he's saying we should, but where people say that they hear this and they hear that, that can never ever be enough to act on anything, because those things are rumor, right? And as to use his phrase, stories given in told in the night, or wives' tales, right? Now, let me give you an experience that I had in the court some years ago, right? Or before we get to that, television and the movie industry, the entertainment industry, has corrupted people's minds as to what goes on in a court. If you speak to some persons who attend jury service for the first time, the perceptions that they have about what goes on in the court, what lawyers do and what they're supposed to do, sometimes some of those ideas border on lunacy. You know, and when you ask them, have you ever been in a court before? They say no. So where you get these ideas from? That's what I see on television. And unfortunately, too often that goes into the jury room, and that could be one possible reason on which these notions are based. Let me give you two examples of two trials that I was involved in person. One was for murder and one was for theft. In the murder case, the only evidence before the court was a statement from the accused man who said that he was walking along a track and he saw the deceased, and the deceased pulled a gun on him and attempted to fire, but the gun jammed. He, realizing this, jumped on the accused. A struggle ensued, the gun went off, and the deceased ended up with the worst of it. There is no other evidence that was put before the court. That was a statement he gave to the police, and that's the only evidence that was in that case. Nobody else, all the witnesses that were brought by the prosecution, they didn't see anything. The closest was where somebody said they heard an explosion outside their house, but when they went outside, everything was gone. That is the only evidence in that case. And 12 persons, as James says, perhaps 12 well-meaning persons all agreed that that evidence was enough to satisfy the requirement of murder in Barbados. And murder is killing with intention. People call it killing with malice aforethought. But they were satisfied that those facts were enough to satisfy the legal definition of murder. We appealed and won. The Court of Appeal ordered a retrial. So he's tried again by another 12 persons some years after. And these 12 good persons and true convicted him again. Same evidence. And we had to go back to the court appeal again to get the conviction quashed. Unfortunately, that young man is free in Barbados today. Right? So persons claim that there are a lot of guilty people who are walking free, but a lot of innocent people are locked up because jurors are not can sometimes not be the most discerning persons either. Another example, a case that I did a few years ago on theft. There was the amount of money was considerable, in excess of $1 million. Guy was accused of stealing from the public, from government.
Oh.
And the central part of the prosecution's case were some checks issued, which when you told them amounted to the amount that he was accused of stealing. But none of those checks were written to that gentleman. There was no evidence connecting those checks to the accused. The evidence led in court amounted to gossip and hearsay. People saying he started wearing expensive clothes, so them taking care of the money, and so on and so on and so forth. And he was found guilty. Right? A few weeks after the trial, I was in the supermarket, and this guy approached me, introduced himself. I told him he looked familiar, but I couldn't place his face. He said, "Mr. Goddard, I was on the jury, but in that matter." I said, "Really? Okay, no problem." I said, "Look, tell me something, man to man. How could y'all convict that man on that evidence?" Right? He said, "Boy, Mr. Goddard, we agreed with you. We agreed that the evidence wasn't good, but we felt that he knew who had the money and he should have talked to the police." You understand me? Now, those are the harsh realities that we face in courts. All right? And we talking about guilty people going free. It is even that ought not to be, certainly. But it is even more dangerous when a system is so hell-bent on punishing people out of fear and whatever else, that they refuse to look at what is before them and allow emotion and other extraneous matters to influence their decisions. That is my fear. And to reduce the requirement to secure a conviction of murder from unanimity to a majority is cause for concern, because with murder, you are seeking to deprive a man of his liberty at best, his life at worst. And these are decisions that cannot be taken lightly. We can't be influenced by what we perceive as a rise in crime. We can't say, well, look, he's a vagabond every second, so we got to lock him up or we got to hang him. You have to be guided by evidence, because one day it is this person, some nameless faceless person that we don't particularly know or particularly like. We see him in the paper, in handcuffs and so on, we say, oh, he look a vagabond. But one day it could be our son, it could be our daughter, it could be us. And the same kind of treatment that we are saying that these people should be deprived of, I am sure we can walk for ourselves or our family. So we have to be very careful.
Statement. Brother James.
Yes.
I have a fear as a layman. It appears to me sometimes that when you look at some of these matters, people seem to be thinking about, let's say somebody died, how the family feel, and somebody must pay. As a layman, I believe that the law is interested in the law, not how people feel. How people, don't get me wrong, how people feel will go after if the man is found guilty. But if you got this thing that somebody has to pay, and that sort of thing, I believe the fairness, the chances of a fair trial for that man are basically squashed. So let the law deal with the law and let emotions and feelings be outside.
Well,
it's a fear that they really have.
If I may, I agree with you. I believe though that a certain degree of empathy, if we practice empathy, we will be interested in the well-being of the accused, to make sure that he has a chance to give his side of the story. and we will not bedevil or demonize the victim. You can have a robust defense without damaging a person's character after their death or their character. Let's say in the case of rape or anything like that. We can do that. I think one of the challenges that we have is that there are a lot of issues that we're not going to get into now that affect criminal justice too. And I think that Steve's concerns have to be real, because look, we have to face it. We are going to be in the dock one day. If time lasts so long, we all live. And we will want a fair shake. Let us not sit down idly by and just because a criminal, a quote unquote criminal, we ain't digging nothing. We have to dig something, because one person's rights a bridge as every person's rights a bridge. We running out of time. I want to make sure we answer these questions. Panelists, forgive me, but I really gotta get going with some of the questions, okay? And they're claiming on us. All right. When the Lord is asking, wasn't the law not changed to facilitate the present, I guess the present circumstances, Mr. Morrison? And it was not under this party. So how can it be reviewed? Wasn't the law not changed to facilitate the present? You know, the present situation, the law and that sort of thing. And was it not under this party? So how can this be viewed? And I guess there's both a legal as well as a political concern. We have every right to ask those questions as persons of faith. Who wants to answer?
Well, the law, the law has always been there, and that is, and I said earlier, I think Steve also agreed with me that when the framers of the Constitution and the law sat down, we don't know what they anticipated, but we doubt that they anticipated that a situation would have arisen like what we have now. But now that we have it, I'm saying that maybe this should be some way of the current government. It would have to be the current government trying to put something in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. So we're not talking party here. We're saying that it's a situation that would affect Barbados regardless of its parties in government, and therefore the powers, this absolute power, would be wielded, by whichever government is in power. It doesn't have to be one government or the other, and so it would be for the benefit of Barbados then if we could have some change, so that if we could have some provision made for this eventuality if it came again.
Okay, that's true, and that answers one of the other questions that I just typed there. Now, Representative Gail is asking, Gail Seeley Griffin, representative governments also have the issue. It may be difficult to keep a majority, and we could find ourselves going to the poll very often. I think she's concerned about the fact that a government needs to have a full majority, a workable majority. Also, I guess the idea that the government, if the people are crying out saying they need more justice, that a government could find itself in trouble if they don't respond accordingly. Any comments on that?
If I might just say something on that issue. I know that we did in fact make the point that there are certain disadvantages with the first past the post system, and we did say that there were alternatives such as a proportional representation system.
Yeah.
The fact is that that exists. However, it is not beyond our creativity as a people in Barbados to come up with a solution that both meets the need of a political party to secure its place in the history, its place in the political system of first past support, at the same time ensure that you have a suitable system of representation for others. In this current case with the 30, as I said, the current Prime Minister did make the point just before her parliament was sworn in that she thought that a suitable constitutional arrangement should be. When I wrote to the 3 leading newspapers on the matter and had comments by some justices in Barbados on the matter, and I made the point that in Grenada, they did seek a constitutional amendment. But what happened in the case of Grenada was that they only got about 35% I think of electorate, and they considered that was not enough to change the system. They were trying to go the route of a referendum. So, but they were trying something, and I made the point in my submission at the time that it has happened not only here in Barbados, and I think Steve made the point that one time it was 24-3, 20. It has happened in Jamaica, it has happened in Grenada, happened in other places in the Caribbean. And I'm saying that the time had come for us to have some kind of constitutional arrangement. And it wouldn't necessarily require that you turn back the clock when the party got 30. It just simply would mean that you could find a way of having a party that got 20%, the Democratic Party in the last elections, 20% of the vote. You could find a way to have them with some representation without necessarily having a voice when it came to vote in the House Assembly. So that there's several things you can do. So to Gail, I will say to you that while representative governments have their problems and other systems have their problems, we need to look for the best that will help to avoid the current situation that we have now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too, brother. Okay, still answering questions. Now there are two. I'm gonna put 2 together because it's interesting. An anonymous attendee says, doesn't the change in the number required to convict reflect the change in the law as it relates to capital and non-capital murder? If that is the case, and the penalty of non-capital murder is the same as rape, shouldn't the price of convicting him be the same? Again, if that is the case and the penalty for a non-capital murder is the same as rape, shouldn't the price of convicting him be the same? And Gail, and this is going to muddy it a little bit, but I think we ought to look at it. Gail is also suggesting, well, letting us know that in the US, the Supreme Court ruled in April 2020, that's this year, that all jury verdicts must be unanimous. So that's also interesting. All right. Steve, Brother Graham, who wants to go first?
I will start. First of all, we don't have different degrees of murder in Barbados. We have murder. We don't have murder 1, murder 2, and all these things that you hear about in the US. So that question is misconstrued. I'm not sure what the person is trying to say. All right. Brother Graham, if you can help, I can't remember. I think the maximum penalty for rape is life imprisonment.
Yeah,
I can't recall.
It is, yeah.
Right. Now, another basic principle in criminal law, when you hear that penalties can be imposed, let's go back to something as simple as the seatbelt law. Right? When it says you gotta pay $500 or whatever it is to the magistrate, if you're found not driving without your seatbelt on. That is the maximum penalty that can be imposed by a court. That is not the penalty. It means that a magistrate or a judge or whoever can impose no punishment, but it can go as far as $500. For rape, you can go as far as life imprisonment. Persons have gotten, this is extreme. In terms of rape, given the example that was rape that was used, probation is a possibility, given or if the court looks at all the circumstances surrounding the accused. If he's young, it could have been a case where the complainant was under 16 and he didn't reasonably know, or that it was consent. All those range of facts. So the penalty for rape is not is not life imprisonment. That is the maximum penalty. So court has a discretion. So let's not move on with those false assumptions, right? So to say that someone would get life imprisonment for capital murder and the same thing for rape and so on, that, I'm sorry, but you have it a bit muddled, and you're confusing yourself, and it's possible to confuse others as well. Okay. In terms of the other part of the question from Gil, where the Supreme Court says that all jury verdicts must be unanimous. Well, I don't know the circumstances, but in Barbados, the only Parliament can set the various requirements in terms of majorities, unanimity for jury verdicts. That's an issue for the legislature. A court cannot, if the Juries Act specifies that that in order to secure a conviction for murder, you must have a unanimous verdict or a majority of 9. A court in Barbados cannot go and accept. Okay, the bill is seeking to change the requirement from unanimity to a majority of 9. And let's say this statute is passed. A court cannot come afterwards and say, "Well, look, I am accepting a verdict of a unanimous verdict," unless someone brings a constitutional motion and perhaps and shows that this statute somehow infringes or violates their constitutional rights in this manner, and the court strikes it down by judicial review, right? But a court cannot legislate. The court cannot override the legislature and change laws and pass laws. They interpret and so on, but they cannot, and they can comment and say, "Well, look, this statute or this clause is ambiguous," and so on, and perhaps Parliament or Congress or whoever needs to look at it again. But a court cannot set its own. A court cannot pass laws, right?
Okay. All right. We're wrapping up, but we have a few more questions. One or two here. Having heard your response, this is an anonymous attendee, to the question about the rights as guaranteed, and building on Dr. Welch's presentation, it sounds to me as though this right, I guess they're talking about the right of representation, is not protected in the way that those in the Constitution are, and can be changed by ordinary acts of Parliament. Having heard your response to the question about the rights as guaranteed, and building on Dr. Welch's presentation, it sounds to me as though this right is not protected in the way that those in the Constitution are, and can be changed by ordinary acts of Parliament. Is it true?
Quite frankly, I do not even know that it makes sense answering that question now, because I think we made a point during the night that we made a point during the night that with the 30-0 Parliament that we have in Barbados right now, they can change the whole constitution, as Steve said, in the twinkle of an eye. So that whole 2/3 majority and all sort of thing is still in writing the law of Barbados. But in reality, Parliament can tonight decide that this right to conscience and so on that we hold there has gone through the window, and all of the other rights because of that 30-0 majority. So there was a time when you had to go to Parliament and you had to indicate that you wanted to change the constitution. You had to make sure that you had enough members on your side to change the constitution and so on. We're not saying that because of the present constitution of our Parliament, you might go through the motions of saying it, but you don't have to, because you already have the majority to change anything in the constitution and to change any law in Barbados, and you can do it within 5 or 10 minutes.
That's right. All right. We have a raised hand from the panel, Brother Welch, and then we also have a raised hand from our attendees, Alex. But we'll go with Brother Welch first, and then Alex, you're on next. Go ahead, Brother Welch.
Actually, I had my hand up a little while ago in response to something else, but it gives me an opportunity to respond to one of the questions that I see here in the system, and it has to do with what's happening today. Into the Chinese example is used.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yes. Now we are seeing that the Chinese. So the question is, poses the question. Chinese are using technology to trace and track people with COVID-19. Now, not only with COVID-19, but with other things as well. There's that group in China who are in fact being tracked by the use of technology. But we're already there. The question is asked, are there any other steps being taken by governments in the Caribbean that can impact on some of the freedoms we now enjoy? The fact is that we really don't know. The truth was that we really simply do not know what happens behind the scenes. What a capacity a government in the Caribbean has to infringe our rights, to use technologies to track us and to interfere with our freedoms. We simply do not know what can happen. What we do know, and I made the point very early on, is that we cannot trust any government, because the truth was that while you may have a preference for a particular party or government as Christians, with an understanding that a government can, once the opportunity presents itself, do things that one would not expect. In terms of the tracking of people, we're there already. When you have your cell phone, this is something that your cell phone. Your cell phone tells certain people, this is not government, this is the people who provide your cell phone providers, your Apple or whoever it is. They can tell you where you are any one time. At one time I lost my cell phone and I was able to go onto a Google app and where my cell phone was. And it gave me the ability, if I had it, I could lock my cell phone remotely, and I could ensure that they might have stolen the cell phone, but they couldn't use it. So if the individuals, if companies can do that, then I would not be surprised if governments have the capacity. The question of will governments act in this way? Well, we don't know. We hope not. Thank you.
All right. Brother Alex, over to you.
Hi, good night, everybody. I just wanted to point out that the Criminal Justice Miscellaneous Provisions Act actually has what are called consequential amendments to the Offenses Against a Person Act to make provision for capital murder, which is where an individual may be sentenced to death, which is the capital punishment, and then all other forms of murder would be a sentence to life imprisonment, and then it works its way down to a sentence of manslaughter, so that there are no divisions in relation to murder. So I don't know that the response that would have come before would have been accurate as it relates to the state that the law will have. If I'm looking at it now, Section 5(1) says, any person convicted of murder may be sentenced to suffer death where, and it has some requirements here for that to work. And then Section 2 says any person convicted of murder otherwise than as provided in subsection 1 may be sentenced to imprisonment for life. So that it would seem to me that we now have murder where you get the capital punishment and murder where you're sentenced to life in prison. And then we work our way down in subsection 4 or 5 where the individual is then sentenced or convicted of manslaughter and sentenced accordingly.
You're correct.
Yeah, yes.
So
That's
as it relates to the question that was asked about it reflecting what it is, the requirement for 9 jurors in the act also points out that that is only in an instance where it is for something other than what is in 5(1). So in that sense, it would be where you are convicted of non-capital murder or where you cannot get the capital punishment. The sentence only the conviction only requires 9 persons.
Yes, that's correct.
My mind is on par with
go on.
the same sentence you get for rape. So actually rape is higher. So rape is life in prison. This is a maximum of 25 years. And you're saying to me that an individual who has a maximum of 25 years and understanding the principles of sentencing, I know that this is the maximum penalty and not necessarily saying that that's what you will get. So understanding that you're saying to me that someone who has to suffer a worse penalty requires less persons to convict him, to me, that doesn't make sense. And if the law is making that distinction, I don't see why it's a challenge.
Wow, okay. Brother Gollop, brother Graham,
No,
I'm sure.
on
Yeah.
reflection,
He's correct.
he's correct. I don't have a difficulty with that.
Yeah, he's correct.
Okay.
They
Thank
just-
you, Alex, very much
they
for
just
that.
what sorry, I'm sorry.
What else?
Sorry, no, I'm just going to say that as I listen to the two lawyers discussing this issue, I think that this is a bill. I further understand it still has to go
The Senate.
to the upper house.
It's not law.
And so in fact, what is happening that these are proposals for changes. It does not mean that this is the end of the story. I mean, we simply don't know yet. But these are proposals which have been voted in the House Assembly. It has steps before it becomes law. So at the current point, there's no distinction when it comes to murder. Murder is murder is murder. There's no distinction. But what the amendments seek to do is to make that distinction. So I think both sides of the same coin. I think that's my interpretation.
Okay.
But
One
you will
last
agree.
question.
You
Sorry.
will
I just wanted to say before I go, sorry.
Yes.
In relation to being called an act and a bill, before a bill, well, it is called a bill up to the point that it is voted by Parliament. Once it is voted by Parliament, it becomes an act. That's in the Interpretation Act. Having become an act of Parliament, it then goes to the Senate where it's approved and signed by the Governor General and published in the Gazette, which makes it law. So it is not a law in force, but it can no longer be called a bill because it has passed the point of being approved by Parliament.
Unmute, Steve.
But no, so well, House of Assembly, Parliament is both houses, but that's a big thing.
Well, I have one last question, and it is from our friend Leonard Phillips again, and it's something that we all can weigh in on as we close. Should the Religious Liberty Department of the Church not be aware of any attempts being made by government to abridge the rights of citizens? I say yes. That's why we're having this discussion. We at Government Hill, our Religious Liberty Department tries to keep on the pulse of what's happening around us, and I called in persons of like minds who would be able to help us. I think, as I said, this discussion does not end here. This is the starting point. We need to go to our various churches and have these discussions so that we can be better equipped and better informed to deal with these things. But I'll leave my panelists to respond to this question and then we'll close.
What I will say, yes, because it's religious liberty and public affairs. But I think one of the problems that we do face in the church is that sometimes, as we're aware, the department, some churches don't have a department that functions. And it is important, in particular, in times like these, that the department be a functioning department. Because your religious liberty person is a person who should be aware of what is going on. He should be aware of history, and they should be able to be aware to look at what is happening and to equate it with prophecy. So in reality, one must understand the importance of the religious liberty department, not that it is more important than any other department. And I do hope that as people become aware, in particular in times like these, for example, quickly, one must be alarmed when one looks at the United States, where you have a whole group of Christians sitting on an advisory council with the president and advising him. And we see what has happened. They were influential in getting him to bring the embassy to Jerusalem. They're instrumental now in getting him to open churches. So when we look at what is happening, what is the next thing they're going to do? So we must make sure that as we keep focusing on Barbados, or we must look outside, we must make sure that when we see these things happening, we are able to draw it to the people. And we must do this if necessary. We must agitate without violating any civil laws.
Thank you, Prince. Brother Welch.
I'm really intrigued when brothers turn the phrase agitate, but not goes right back into December. I thought that was an excellent interjection. I will say that we do have to be on our guard, and I do agree that in many of our churches there's a non-functioning unit called other things that are after that. But we also have to be very careful as Seventh-day Adventists. The servant of the Lord talks about not bringing on the time of trouble before the time. There's a statement, I can't recall the exact place where it's taken from, but at some point I will be able to remember that.
You're correct.
What is really saying is that we have to be careful with assumptions about what's happening and attempting to place everything that's happening now within some kind of eschatological framework. For example, this COVID-19, if you see the number of conspiracy theories that are migrating through the Adventist circles, they're trying to make assumptions about COVID-19 and the whole plan of salvation. Yes, we understand that Jesus talks about things that will happen, and we must expect these things to happen, but we must also be careful about trying to build some theology on shaky grounds. I know, for example, one person that I know very well, a vaccine, the making of a vaccine, and began to attempt to place on the vaccination some nefarious objective of taking a chip and injecting the chip into some person's body. Now, why that is possible, I think that too many of us miss, and the whole question of the last days is not bungled so much on this question of a computer chip. It has to do with religious issues. It has to do with the law of God versus the tradition of man. So there are things we have to be very careful about, and I'm just saying that our people need to walk carefully, look at what is happening around us, and get ready to speak out. But let's move with caution. That's all I will say, and I end there.
Okay, and we are ending. Brother Graham. Okay, your mic. Unmute your mic, Brother Graham.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I was saying that successive governments in Barbados have been very kind to Seventh Adventists, and we ought to be thankful for that. And we have to be vigilant, but at the same time, I don't think that we have to be careful that we don't become too political. I think we were, historically we dealt with that whole area of conscience and the right to worship and so on. I like the debate tonight, but we have to be still guard, the very edges to make sure that we don't sway on one side or the other. But it was the most enjoyable discussion, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Now, with respect to the question asked, being part of this ministry for a little bit now has shown how important the issue of religious liberty, freedom of conscience, and public affairs is to us as individuals and as a church community. I think you guys can agree with me that persons are beginning to appreciate the importance of these concepts, religious liberty and public affairs. And I know the issue is public affairs, not public relations. So there are two distinct and very different issues altogether. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, as is mentioned, this position has been dormant within our churches for quite a while. But I think you all can agree with me that there has been some awakening, and we are seeing people becoming more aware of the issues of the day, and we must monitor current affairs and see these trends as they develop and be aware of what's happening. As Brother Welch pointed out, we cannot try to force a square through every circle. Not everything that is happening is the responsibility of the Catholic Church. Bill Gates isn't trying to pump some electronic chip into us so that something later he can monitor who buying what and all. A lot of these theories are utter nonsense. And I can't say anything less than that. Utter nonsense. They make no sense as far as biblical prophecy is concerned, and they make no sense in everyday logic. Right? So we must be balanced in our approach to how we view current events. Now, the current composition of Parliament, we've emphasized the dangers that scenario creates, and there's no parliamentary opposition. But that does not mean government's feet cannot be held to the fire. And when I say government, I'm not meaning this government. I'm saying any government's feet can't be held to the fire. Persons in our position can use mediums like these, the calling programs, their letters to the editor, and with the World Wide Web as it is now, those are methods that can be used by persons who, although not present in Parliament, they can use to agitate and put pressure on politicians to keep them in line, as it were. So, as we see things develop, we must not throw our hands in the air and say all is lost, because it isn't. Whatever means we have, we should use and apply to ensure that those things that we have become accustomed to, those things that we hold dear, are protected as much as possible. And we must not go quietly into the night while wicked men move forward to mete out abuse and trample upon the rights of others or ourselves. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank everyone for being here, the attendees. I want to thank the participants, Dr. Welch, Brother Graham, Brother Steve, Brother Prince. I want to thank you all for being part of this. I just want to acknowledge two of our colleagues who have come in a little late, but they've been part of it and participating quietly. Brother Hadley Sobers and Brother Kevin Lane. It's good, even though you're late, to be part of it, and we are always appreciative of you and what you contribute. This conversation is not over, okay? Time is up, but this conversation is not over. We all go to other churches. We all belong to different churches. We need to start this conversation in our own churches so that people can have a better understanding. Knowledge is power. And in order for us to grow and to develop, we need to acknowledge that knowledge is power. So we need to arm ourselves with true knowledge. I'm glad that Brother Welch mentioned all these strange things that have been coming up, because they have us befuddled and they're taking us away from the real issues at hand. And yes, there may be things afoot, but everything is not a Catholic plot, and everything is not something where some shadowy government agency is trying to get us. Sometimes it's just what we see. But you know what? The Holy Spirit will give us guidance and give us wisdom to discern these things. That's why we need to continue this conversation with our home churches. Now, someone says that being political is not wrong, and it's true. You can support a political party, but what Brother Welch is saying, and what people like me have been saying for a long time, we should not be so slavish that everything they do is fine, and that we find every way to defend or attack based on what our political view is. I think that our church needs to engage our leaders in such a way that they understand that we care about our nation, that we care about them as individuals, but we also care about the rule of law, and more importantly, the rule of law of heaven. So let us leave here as persons who are willing and ready to make a difference where we are. We can still brighten the corner. It's not just a song, we can brighten the corner where we are. Let us use this information to help our brethren wherever we worship, to help our friends, and even if we have to make a call to a representative and say something to him or her to help them to realize that, you know, we are concerned. But we have to agitate without being arrogant or being nasty. We can do that. But more importantly, we need to represent God in all that we do. I thank you all for being part of this. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Corey and Ronisha, who've been our hosts at the Government Hill Media team. I want to thank the leadership of Government Hill for allowing us to be part of it, every participant, every attendee. Thank you all. God bless. At this time, Brother Prince is going to say a word of prayer as we close.
Close our eyes and bow our heads. O God of love, who reigns from above, we come boldly but reverently before your throne of grace. Thank you, dear Lord, that you can give us knowledge, wisdom, that we can discuss civil matters in such a manner, because we recognize that in the end time, that these things would reflect on us. We want to thank you, dear Lord, that you have given us the knowledge, and that you will give us the patience, and that you will give us hearts that will not have no fear. Lord, we want to thank you that you may instill within us certain knowledge about certain things. And we know that it's our duty that we be able to share these things with our brothers, pointing them to you, the only true God, in Jesus Christ, your Son, whom you've sent. Heavenly Father, we pray that as we continue within these various departments, that we would continue to work very faithfully and loyally to hasten your coming. Heavenly Father, we pray that you may bless all the families. Bless all the families who are here. And we pray, the Lord, that as we continue to work for you, that through your Holy Spirit, that we will continue, dear Heavenly Father, to expose men and women to the truth, to the ultimate truth, who is none other than Jesus Christ himself. So we ask, oh Heavenly Father, continue to bless us, and may you continue to give us that power, give us that spirit, that we may be faithful to the cause. This is my prayer, and let us all say, Amen.
Amen. Amen. I just like my panelists, and that includes you two, Hadley and Kevin, to hold on for just a few minutes. But thank you all very much. I think this has been wonderful. It's a good start to have this conversation. Just about 5 minutes.